I would like to explain runnable lambda in this section. Allow me to run this pip show LangChain so that I can display metadata regarding this LangChain attribute. I'm going to import runnable lambda with my LangChain core runnables. So first I'm going to define a lambda function with this sum output, and I'm going to display this list where I'm going to see this sum would be display with this respective value. So what will be the sum role of this sum function? This will have input 1, 2 and 5. The output would be 8 here. Now I can initialize another lambda. With this lambda you can see the find square 8. Here you can see what is the lambda 8 here. This would be the lambda which is going to provide this input 8 into 8 equals to 64 here. Now with this 64 I can see this is same as runnable lambda here. I can initialize these lambda functions also with runnable lambda. Here I'm going to invoke these list where I can see the same output is showing with this sum function. So what is this? 1 plus 2 plus 5. So this is what? 8. So runnable lambda is just have imported this sum function here, which is 8 now. Now I'm going to run this cell with this power 2 and let's invoke this value here. Can you see? Now this is going to invoke 64 here. So whatever value will be provided here, it will get the power of 2 of this runnable square. This would be 8 here. I'm going to provide these two things with this sequence here, runnable sum and runnable square. So what will happen here? It will first get the runnable sum, execute runnable sum here, this would be the 8, and then it will get the power of this 8, this would be 64 here. So final output would be 64 here. Let's run this cell so that I'm going to run this cell, I'm going to run this output here. Can you see this is showing 64 as well. Now I'm going to change, let's see what will happen if I change the order of this chaining. I'm going to provide this value here, I'm going to provide this value here, and this would be the control X, and this would be this value. Let's run. I'm going to run this cell. Can you see this is not showing any output? Why? Because the first it is not having that summation value. This is not going to sum this part and not going to power this value and not going to sum eventually. So this would be the wrong sequence here. If you will change somewhere in this function, then only you can run this code. Okay, so I'm going to keep the sequence in a same format. Okay, let's move ahead. I'm going to run this cell. So let's define this variable again, define this variable again. Now let's print this graph flowchart. Here you can see lambda input, lambda and lambda output. What we have done, so first lambda is for my sum function and the second lambda is for my power function. So this would be, for example, I have given 1, 2, 5. So this would be summation of 8. Then I'm going to provide 8 cross 8, that equals to 64. Finally, I'll get the output here. So this would be the input and this would be the output sequence, and you can see it in a same graph as well. Let's move ahead with this chain decorator. How we can define the same thing with the chain decorator. I'm going to import this chain from my LangChain runnable, and let's define these two functions, find sum and find square. So these two functions will be there. I'm going to define runnable lambda and runnable lambda find square as well. So I'm going to pass these two functions which we have defined earlier, and I'm going to pass the same function to my runnable lambda as well. This would be chain 1. Now I'm going to invoke this particular function, list would be passed there. So So what will happen here? This is going to find sum. So 1 plus 2 plus 5 would be equals to 8. Now this find square would be invoked here. So this would be what? 8 into 8 would be equal to 64. Finally, we can depict 64 value. So what's the role of decorators here? Decorators are functions that modify the behavior of another function or a class, enhancing their functionality. Here, the chain decorator wraps the runnable sum function in a runnable lambda, just as we manually did above. Here I am going to define this runnable, I am going to define this sum, and going to define this sum square. Here you can see this is the sum value and this is the square of 2 power of 2 value here. Now I'm going to define this runnable sum and this runnable square. Let's see the type here. Can you see this is showing runnable and this is showing runnable lambda? Everything is showing in a different way. Okay, so this is defined in a chain decorator, and in a similar way I'm going to run this same chain and chain 2 here. The same, the output and role responsibility is same, and you can have a quick review over this invoke function. Let's add memory to a chain here. I'm going to implement a setup for this memory. This would be string output, this would be a prompt template, and this is going to conversation summary memory. Let's run this cell and let's define a template. So what would be the template here? This would be the message log, this would be a human log. Now with this template I'm going to pass my prompt template, and this would be a final prompt template, at chat OpenAI would be there. With this prompt template I'm going to create a chain. So this would be importing first my prompt template, then my chat OpenAI will be passed there, then it will pass in a string output parser, and this chain would be in a sequence also. This sequence really matters here. I'm going to run this sequence. Let's run this sequence and invoke with this message log and the relevant question. Can you elaborate a bit more about this fact? This is the fact which we are going to talk about with this chain. I'm going to find conversation summary memory with this LLM method, and this would be the memory key. I'm going to load memory. Here you can see it's not showing anything. Let's runnable pass through with additional keys here. Here I'm going to import one more library which is going to provide complete understanding of runnable pass through. So this is the library, and this is the template with this message log, question, and this prompt template will be there. I'm going to chat this OpenAI, going to create this prompt chat as we have earlier, and then conversation summary memory and load memory variables, and then runnable pass through, assigning my message log here. This is gonna assign with this question, can you give interesting fact, and you're going to define this lambda where I'm going to pass this particular value. So what's going to invoke here? It's going to assign this first letter, going to assign the second letter. For example, this input is high, so I can see this is going to define first letter here, second letter here. Let's change the message here. For example, my input is ML. So I'm going to run this cell. Can you see the first letter and second letter also showing in a different method? So this will walk you through the responsibility of running runnable pass through, what kind of message we can pass through this question as well. See you in next lecture with more LCL concepts. So what we have done here, we have seen the chain decorator, we have seen a runnable lambda and other respective memories as well. Keep learning, keep growing.